Hello guys, welcome. Today I've got another time lapse with commentary for you that I thought you might enjoy. So what this is this is a scene from my short film called Wildfire. You can check it out on my channel if you want to. And it's the owl attack. So this dude is about to attack this snow leopard, and then the owl swoops in and gouges his eyes out, I guess. Pretty brutal way to go. But this scene in particular, I thought it went pretty well, and I'm not sure why that is. Maybe I think it was down to some luck and some things went well. I was feeling good that day or something. I thought I would show you guys the process behind it so that you can see how I made it. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my process as well. So this scene is a little different to my other fight scenes, mostly because normally I've drawn the attacker first and then I draw the defender, but this time I've kind of switched it around to be the opposite. So I've drawn the guy kind of reeling backwards, like losing his footing first before the owl is even there, and then I drew the owl on top, which is a little bit different, but it actually worked pretty well. And I'm not sure why that is, why I tend to favor drawing the attacker first normally, but I think maybe it felt better to do it this way for this circumstance because he was the larger character and maybe perhaps more the focus of it. I don't know exactly. Or maybe it was because I needed him as like I needed to get down the movement of him before I went into drawing the owl, because the owl would kind of be perched on his face. So yeah. But I came up with a little bit of advice for making a scene like this. If you want to draw an action scene out like something like this, a few different points. So I'll start off with try to start with a strong storyboard pose as your foundation. So before I went into the scene, I had drawn out two poses of the owl attack, and that's what I based this motion on. And if you don't storyboard, then you really should. It's just it's very good practice, and it means it just has a whole world of benefits to it. And my other point is to find or make whatever reference you can before going into this and study it a little bit. So what I did, I'll probably have it show up on the screen now. I made my own reference for this scene because, well, you can't really find a lot of footage of people getting attacked by owls. It's a very uncommon thing to actually happen in nature. And of course, this animation isn't trying to be like real life. It's not a documentary. It's entirely fantasy. So that makes it harder to find references for specific scenes like this. So what I actually did is I set up the camera and the tripod and everything, and I just pretended to be attacked by an owl. It looked absolutely ridiculous, so I had to wait till everyone was out of the house before I tried it. But I'm glad I did, and you know, filming reference footage is really good fun. It's just so much fun to like try and act out the scenes first, and then you see the footage. You have a great time doing it, so I highly recommend it. I just use a very cheap Nikon camera for it. So what was my other point? Okay, my next point is be prepared to delete the drawing you have got and start again. So if a pose isn't working for you, it can often be better to just scrap it and try again and just come at it with a new approach rather than trying to endlessly fix it. Now I do a combination of both. I do fix my poses, of course, but there's also a point that you reach when you realize, okay, there's nothing good about this pose, there's nothing that is redeeming of this pose. You'll be better off just starting again. So yeah, don't be afraid to do that. I mean, that's part of 2D animation, is being able to let go of what you've got, I guess. It's kind of sad when you have to. I did it a few times in this scene, and I'm quite glad I did because it ended up working out a lot better because of it. So here's the main tip, which I think is the best piece of advice I could give. Now this is like a checklist that I think of through my head. Now I advise that every so often you watch through the animation you've drawn and have it on a loop and just watch over it again and again and again. Now I do this a lot in this scene, however I've taken some of these chunks out because I figured you wouldn't want to just watch the animation scene looping through 10 or 12 times in a row, like sped up. It probably wouldn't be good for you guys to watch because you get bored. But for me, making this scene, it's essential to do that, because while I'm looking at the animation play out, I can go through this checklist and check for myself that certain things are happening in the motion. So the things to look out for are the limbs following their arcs. So are the limbs kind of swinging round rather than just, or if one of them is out of place and it kind of moves just for one frame outside of that arc, you might want to correct that. And also if they're moving in straight lines, it does happen sometimes, but normally most of your limbs are going to be moving in arcs generally. Not just your limbs, but also, if your character is holding a sword or something, or his head or his face, if he's turning his face, all of these things, they move in arcs. So just check that they're following a nice smooth arc. The next one to look out for is, are the parts of the body maintaining their scale? So it's very common, especially if you're doing continuous, where you draw out one frame, you draw out the next frame, you draw out the next frame. You can find that certain body parts are getting too big or too small, they're shrinking. So if this happens, just select the area that it is and expand it. And that's what I do, I just do it manually. And the next one is, so this is a question you'd be asking yourself, can you exaggerate any of the poses more? So on one of these poses that I've drawn, he's clutching his eyes, his hands are on his face, kind of like trying to protect himself. But I didn't just draw his hands like normal because he's in agony. So I had all his arms, his entire arm with his elbows like well above his head and his head right back and like an arched back, So if you're gonna show him emoting in some way, go all out with it. Like, don't hold anything back from that unless you're trying to go for some super realistic, like Pixar kind of animation where it's like hyper realistic. And I don't advise that, to be honest. I advise you that you exaggerate things as much as you can. So the next one is related to this. Can you squash or stretch any of your poses more? So a squash and stretch is a fantastic way to get your poses to be very bouncy and lifelike and like a bouncing ball, really. So in this shot, I used the owl as an example of squash and stretch. So when he's coming in, like about to pounce, you'll see he's very spread out and kind of his legs are outstretched, very stretched out. And then as soon as he lands, it kind of squashes a little bit. And this helps a lot to convey the forces that are at work. So look through your scene and see if any of the poses of the characters can be squashed more or if they can be stretched more. If you have it squashing, you're going to want to stretch it as well. If you have one pose where it's stretching, the next pose will be squashed probably. I'm going to get into squash and stretch a lot more in another tutorial because I think it's a very important principle to keep in mind. So the next question is, are there any frames or poses in there that don't need to be in there? So this is a bit more tricky to figure out, but sometimes when I'm doing a piece of frame by frame animation like this, some of the frames come to my attention where I realize there's not really a lot of use for this frame. It would be better if I took it out. So it's actually like having a frame in there that doesn't have a purpose can sometimes, not always, but it can sometimes make the entire thing worse rather than make it better. So of course it depends what approach you're doing, what kind of scene, but it can be that like having more poses that don't have any meaning to it or don't have any point, they might just slow things down a little bit, and you might want a very punchy, to the point piece of motion which just says what it does. Now the opposite of that would be if you're doing a resting pose. So resting animation, I think that's what they call it. They might call it something different, but it's when your character is just standing there and you basically have to boil the pose, so draw over it again so that it looks like there's just little micro movements going on. Because when someone stands, they don't stand absolutely still. Like might sway a little bit from one hip to the other or blink and things like that. So that's like kind of the opposite of that, where you just throw them in because they're not doing anything. So anyway, the next one, do I have another one? Oh yes, this is one of the ones that I've seen recently, so I definitely wanted to include this one in there. Do any of the moving parts start or stop very abruptly? So it's a question of easing, really. Like, are you easing in and out of certain movements? And the reason I thought of this one is because I saw this animator's showreel earlier today, and his drawings were great, but there was absolutely no easing in the animation. And so it looked extremely stiff as a result. You know, when the character was going from a standing position to a walking position, he would just start very abruptly. There was no like slow, gradual ease into it. So I think it is quite important to do that on your shots. Of course, in a scene like this, with the starting movement, the thing is that we're seeing a shot that is midway through the movement. So the owl already has maximum speed built up, and the owl is just going to collide with this stationary man. So it's about calculating that. But you'll see that as the owl comes in and lands on the prey, which is the man in this case, the owl slows down very fast. So that's an example of easing as well, I guess. So I'm actually going to make a checklist of these things, and I'm going to put it up on my wall. I actually want to print one out and keep it on my wall next to my desk to remind me to think of these things when I'm doing a piece of animation like this. I think they're that important to do. So maybe I'll make a little image or something and you can have it as a desktop icon. I don't know. Maybe I'll try that. So I think I did have a few more points, but I think I'm running out of time today. So that's all I got for today. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please leave a comment or suggestion down below, and please visit my website for more tutorials. I have tutorials and I have the source which are available for you to download if you want to explore my files. And I'll see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.